I've gone down to the press club every day. I check the wires in their library, mingle with other paper boys, and I asked them the question many times, why, when if 120 film stars or 120 NFL football players met behind locked and guarded doors at a remote location for 3 days, you'd try very hard to penetrate and find out what those movie stars or football players are doing. Well, I have no curiosity at all when 120 of the world's most powerful financial leaders and political leaders meet for 3 days in a remote location behind armed guards in a complete blackout. Well, I have no curiosity.
Actually, quite a bit of security, but it's discreet.
So what would happen if someone tried to sneak through the trees back there?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to try it.
What we do hear coming out of those meetings is incredible about the plans of the New World Order to consolidate power. Political power and economic power coming together at the highest level. But what I call the lapdog media, the control media in this country, you would think that they would be going to court, crying freedom of information, open meetings, sunshine law, and all of these things, but the silence is deafening.
Attendees at recent Bilderberg meetings have included presidential advisor George Stephanopoulos, Senator Sam Nunn, David Rockefeller, former Senator Lloyd Bentsen, and Henry Kissinger. 1 month earlier, 50 liberal groups met in Washington to discuss their opposition to international banks and economic globalization. In reaction, one of the major items on the Bilderberger agenda was the role of liberals in various organizations. Also on the docket, the separatist movement in Canada, how fragmented Canadian provinces could be absorbed into the United States. Next, the expansion of NAFTA from Alaska to Chile, to boost corporate profits by encouraging American businesses to move to Latin American countries, where the costs of labor are low and environmental laws are not enforced. Do organizations like the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Federal Reserve pull the strings of our lives like master puppeteers? Or are such ideas merely the paranoid ravings of conspiracy theorists?
The people who call conspiracy theorists are not the conspiracy theorists themselves. We're talking about facts here. The Bilderberg Group does exist. The Federal Reserve does exist. The people who are members of the Bilderberg Group are also the people who do control the Federal Reserve. These are all facts.
David Rockefeller himself thanked the media for keeping this all hushed up. If it wouldn't have been for you, then we wouldn't have been able to pursue our interests towards internationalism. They're conspiring to eliminate the United States as we know it through something as simple as the elimination of our national identity.
Why is it the major media would deny this? Let's look at the ownership of the major media. Let's look at the roster of, say, the Bilderberg meeting. Katharine Graham owns the Washington Post. Katharine Graham has been to the Bilderbergers. Conrad Black, one of the largest media barons in Canada and Europe, has not only been to these meetings, but he has hosted the meeting just a few years ago.
Every year they meet in secret, and there is an absolute news blackout. There is never anything reported in any of those papers.
In this country, the press is seen as the fourth estate. You know, you've got the judiciary branch, the legislative branch of government, the executive branch of government. Then you're supposed to have the press keeping an eye on these three. If leaders from these three are working with other leaders around the world to determine economic policy, wars, human rights, etc., then yes, the press has a responsibility to get in there and to inform people. But just 2 years ago, I think 1997, the First Lady attended the meeting in Georgia. A few papers in Georgia picked it up, but this is the First Lady at a meeting with people who really arguably want to rule the world. Now that should have been front page news.
Well, the fifth estate are the international bankers, and they just couldn't accomplish their goals without being to control the electronic media. Now, what they hate more than anything else is this outbreak amongst the internet, cable TV, radio talk shows. That's what they can't control. They need control, and without it, they aren't going to get what they want.
Of course, one person's sinister conspiracy could just be another person's private affair.
The Bilderberg is a clubby atmosphere. That's what it is, really. It's a clubby affair. by invitation only.
Now, when you see groups like Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, you have to remember bankers work internationally, and the central banks in all countries work together, and they do this through special groups. They formed the Council on Foreign Relations at the Versailles Peace Conference after World War I. Now, many conservatives believe the CFR runs in the United States, but it only does it secondhand because the real orders come out of London first.
Decisions arrived at in secret Bilderberger meetings apparently do affect our lives as much, if not more, than the policies adopted through Democrat-Republican squabbling. When no other newspaper bothered, the tiny Washington publication, The Spotlight, single-handedly invaded the shroud obscuring these secret gatherings.
Well, by penetrating the secrecy of Bilderberg, we were able to do an advanced story on the end of the Cold War, the downfall of Maggie Thatcher, an advanced story on the Persian Gulf War, then President George Bush's reversal from his read my lips, no new taxes pledge.
The financial entities that dominate the Federal Reserve, the Bilderberg Group, are largely centered around the Rockefeller family and the Rothschild family. Names such as Chase Manhattan, Citibank, all these groups that move in the Rockefeller sphere of influence and the Rothschild sphere of influence are the glue that hold the Bilderberg elite together.
Most troubling of all is evidence that the attendees of these secret meetings may even choose our presidents.
In December of 1974, there was a major headline on the editorial page of the Atlanta Constitution that said Jimmy Carter is running for what? And the what was about this running American president.
Jimmy Carter had been a one-term governor of Georgia, hardly known to the American people. He, however, had an entree into the international elite through his membership in David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission. No one had ever heard of Jimmy Carter. I think that's fair to say. Yet, within the next several years, as he announced his presidential campaign, started moving towards a Democratic presidential nomination, he started getting a lot of favorable media coverage, particularly from media connected to the Rockefeller sphere of influence. Jimmy Carter was painted as a populist, a man of the people.
I remember when we couldn't find a microphone.
When in fact, he was moving in the highest circles of the international elite.
When we discovered that the obscure governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, had attended his first Bilderberg meeting in Baden-Baden, Germany in 1991, we were able to anticipate a political future for the young man.
When I discovered in 1991 that Bill Clinton had attended the Bilderberger meeting, I was able to predict that he would be the candidate for the presidency of the Democratic Party. I didn't think he'd be elected president, incidentally. And so they picked him. The Bilderbergers actually picked him to be the president.
I will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Bill Clinton, like Jimmy Carter, is a product of the Rockefeller empire. Bill Clinton has a few up on Jimmy Carter, though. Not only was Clinton a member of the Trilateral Commission, but he was also invited to become a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He had the imprimatur of the Rockefeller and Rothschild families.
Well, you know, I grew up like everybody, every other kid in the United States, thinking our president of the United States, most powerful man in the world. But it's just not the case. You know, even Bill Clinton has admitted that he is only a virtual president anymore. That was in a speech in September of 1998.
Just when you think the economy's stable, just when you think you're made in the shade, someone changes the rules.
Is there a conspiracy? If we are onto the fomenters of what's loosely called the New World Order, the free movement of capital and goods across national boundaries is clearly a big part of their agenda.
The global elite have been the primary promoters of free trade precisely because of the fact that they are the ones who control the major multinational corporations. They are the ones who want to build televisions in Mexico.